What is up, everybody? This is Adam. Welcome back to Fouled Out. The NBA is off to quite the start this offseason with some big trades, some bold moves happening in the last couple of weeks surrounding the NBA draft. Matt and Clint, that is right. We finally have Clint back after trying to get him on for a couple of weeks. Kept having technical issues or this or that, but he is here. He's ready to go. Matt and Clint are coming on in just a minute to break down the beginning of the NBA offseason. We're going to talk about the NBA draft, some of the moves that have been made, and what we are looking forward to most in free agency coming up, as well as what my favorite team, the Sacramento Kings, are doing, and what Matt's favorite team, the Detroit Pistons, did in the NBA draft and what they're going to be looking at going forward. So, action-packed episode. Got our buddy Clint back. Let's go. All right, we are back, and as promised, this time, Matt and I got Clint. How you doing, Clint?
I'm doing better than I was. I had some moving stuff, and then I had some technical problems where I had to reboot my entire PC. And you guys are finally getting the experience that I was hoping for of having all of my old programs installed for my audio stuff.
I forget which episode it was, but there was an intro where I said, yeah, we got Matt's going to come on, Clint's going to come on. We're going to talk about the NBA finals. And then you had technical issues. So we lost you and I never fixed the intro.
No,
I got all sorts of DMs. I got all sorts of feedback. They're like, wait, where was Clint? Was he on? He didn't say anything. And I was like, he's just really quiet that day. Not a lot of opinions on the NBA finals.
I had so many, and I had so many good takes too. You guys, Matt knew I was at work, like talking all sorts of hot shit about like all sorts of stuff. And I one of the games I had called within like 10 points. Like I had all my line like completely good. It was under like 110 or something like that, or close to it. And I was like, damn, that would have been the day I would have been talking about stuff too, and I would have had that epic win. But alas.
Things are making so much more sense now because Matt sounded like twice as smart as he normally does during the NBA finals. Pretty sure he just stole all your takes at work and then came on this podcast.
That's okay.
That's all takes are. Stolen.
Yeah. As long as the information was disseminated, like, I don't really care. That the important part is that it was floated out there.
I mean, Matt picked the Heat, so.
Hey, no, I did not pick the Heat. Thank you very much.
No, I'm just kidding.
But I did pick the Heat to get to the finals, so.
Yeah, it was good. It was a good selection. But we are here to talk about what is possibly the chalkiest NBA draft of all time. At least top
the first
five.
Yeah. After that, it got a little weird.
Yeah, we were talking before the draft, and I kind of like laid out what the odds said the draft would be. I was like, okay, if we go by FanDuel or we go by DraftKings right now, it says Wemby, Miller, Scoot, and then the Thompson twins.
Mm-hmm.
And we're like, okay, there's no way that's going to happen in that order, like in that exact order, right? That's what everybody's expecting. And then draft day comes, boom. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Nothing crazy until we get a little bit later.
Yep.
So we start with Victor Wembanyama going number 1 overall to the Spurs. Negative 50,000 odds. There was a guy who bet $60K on it and won $300. That's the kind of odds like that. We knew this was coming for over a year. We don't have to spend a lot of time on this, but you guys getting kind of sick of Wemby already, or is it just me?
That's a good question. So I do want to state that I think in the fall, when we initially talked about the draft and where Wembanyama was going to end up, I said that the Spurs would be the best place for him. Yeah. And I think that was like a pretty good call. I was kind of surprised that they weren't able to.
It doesn't feel like it was a coincidence, but.
No, I was hoping that they wouldn't have finished in the spot where they got the number 1 pick or whatever, but I did, like, I'm not sick of it. It's one of those things where I think everyone needs to take a very healthy sip of patience, because I don't think that he's going to have like a really good blowout year until his junior or senior year in the league. Like, he's coming in looking smaller than Kevin Durant looked when he got here, and
Yep.
I think physicality of the league is really important, especially against people who are his size. Weight
Yeah.
advantage is definitely a thing, and I have no doubt in my mind that he'll be a great player, but his body has to catch up with his skill. And I think that that's kind of where you're going to see him. I don't even know if you'll see him that much as freshman year, strictly because I think the Spurs organization knows what they have, and they're going to do their best to leverage that in a way that he'll develop in a healthy manner, so he doesn't have a lot of the problems that you see traditional big men have with their feet or their ankles or knees. So I'm excited, but I'm going to temper my expectations, because I don't think that he's going to get the crazy amount of playing time, and that he's going to make as big an impact as everybody thinks he is. That's not to say that he isn't good. Obviously, he is. He's phenomenal talent. However, you were playing with a much lower caliber of player over there, and you're coming in and playing against a bunch of grown ass men now, and you're going to kind of see what it's like. So,
Yeah. Well, and we got to think about like the coach that he's going to be playing for. Greg Popovich loves his veterans. And that's not to say that he isn't going to have a fair chance to get his playing time, but he's going to have to earn every minute. Like, he's obviously going to get minutes, but as a rookie, even the first overall pick, going to play with Greg Popovich, expecting to play 35 plus minutes a game, like, I don't see that happening. And I don't think that would be good for him, as we have recounted the potential durability issues that he could encounter numerous times. We definitely want him to have at least a year or two in an NBA weight training, routine to kind of build up that body.
well, even
But
conditioning
also,
too.
yep,
Like that, I
yeah.
think that that's really important as well.
The biggest concern there is that he does all that stuff that we know he can do on an NBA floor for 82 games a year. And then he doesn't have, all the stabilizers built up the way that he needs to. And then he starts to, have that issue where like your body can do things that the joints aren't prepared to be able to hold up to. That's the absolute worst case scenario. And like there's still NBA players on that roster that are going to be fighting for their own playing time too. And it very well could take him a minute to adjust from the European play style to the NBA play style.
Who is that Chet Holmgren, who had the foot injury and took him
Yep.
out? I think that's a cautionary tale of what I would advise against.
Mhm.
There was some drama, I guess, going on about how he didn't want to play in like a FIBA World Cup or something for his country, but he wants to do preseason games, and I would even have him sit those out. Like, I wouldn't even put him on preseason court at this point in time,
That
because
way.
there's like I would hate to see something really stupid happen where the first year he's over here, he's essentially redshirted because he's dealing with a nagging injury that is gonna, have implications down the road. I think just getting him healthy, getting him acclimated to what like you said, Matt, the conditioning, weight training, and filling out his body a little bit long term is probably like the best thing. And I'm also not ignorant to the fact that like he's a guy who's going to put asses in seats. So yeah, I don't think
Yeah.
like 10 to 15 minutes is a game is like unreasonable. However, if you want this guy to develop properly, I think that putting him in a position to learn rather than just come out swinging, being the guy is a better prospect. I would hate to see something like what happened to Ben Simmons happen with him, and I can't see that happening with Pop. But there's been a lot of talent that's come into the league, even over the past couple of years, who've really like floundered, and it's because they were not set up for success. So that would be my big concern for him. But I'm glad to see that he got his payday. Like he's going to be doing it, and I wish him the best.
So love you guys. Appreciate you being here. I think you're insane if you think he's not going to play right away, and the expectation is that he's going to be the man in San Antonio. Greg Popovich is almost 70 years old and did not sign a 3-year extension to continue to miss the playoffs.
I mean, I think 15 minutes a game is shooting a little low. I'm thinking like 25, 20.
No, he's a full-time. He is a full-time starter day one.
He very likely is going to be out for 60 games.
Why? He has no injury history. When has he ever been hurt?
The history on those body types is alarming.
There's a difference between playing 40, 50 games a season and doing what you're doing over there to transitioning to 82 games of a bunch like his play style. Yeah, sure. We can get on the outside and we can finesse and do all this, but he's going to be playing against people who are bodying him. And I just want to clarify for the record, I don't think that Pop will take that route. I think that he's going to get miles on his legs and he's going to get minutes. I'm just saying if it were me and I didn't have to answer to anyone and I was going to develop this kid into the greatest talent that I could, that's how I would do it. I wouldn't put any unreasonable expectations on him. I would just say, hey, we're going to go out our first 2 years. I'm not worried about you trying to chase rookie of the year or whatever. We're just trying to get better. And that's how I would approach it. And I understand that that's not practical for an NBA franchise that's throwing millions and millions of dollars at this kid. However, I do think, I wouldn't want him going out and just getting railroaded every single game, have his confidence destroyed, and then having a market like San Antonio saying, well, what the hell? Like, you come in here with some really high expectations and we've had some really, really talented big men and you're not living up to that. Like, what the fuck are you doing? And I think that's like more or less where I'm coming from. And I agree 100%. They're probably going to do all of those things. And I think that they are going to pay for it. I genuinely believe that. And it's because he's small. It's not like he's coming in Zion Williamson, oversized, like a shit brick house, just running through people. He's a wiry dude. And with that kind of body type and the things that we've seen phenomenal talents lose entire seasons due to really stupid shit. And it's with their feet and their knees and their ankles normally. So,
and if there is one coach too that's going to say, well, I don't give a shit about the butts and seats, it's going to be Pop.
Yeah.
I just don't see him signing an extension at that age to continue to be bad. He's just not that dude. I see San Antonio, they're a young team. They have money this offseason to make that team better and to start making a push. And it all starts and ends with the next great thing, quote unquote.
I would say that the extension is a sign of more investment in the long term.
3 years though?
Yeah, we're going to put in this year to make sure that we've got a foundation for him so that the next 2 years can be our window.
I feel like the contract talks are a moot point. His place there is cemented regardless of what the team does, in my opinion. They're not going to run him out of there for a poor season or whatever. And
no, they won't run him out. But I'm thinking if I'm him, I want to win basketball games. Why am I coming back to not win basketball games again? What's the point? Why am I if I'm
because Pop, in 2 or 3 years you could have a chip?
Yeah.
But if he doesn't get hurt, we can do that anyway, and we can start developing him by playing him in NBA games. He's not going to play center this year. I don't think. I think he's a wing. He's like a 7'5" wing with his skills and his abilities. They'll play. They got Zach Collins. They got Haim Birch. They'll let other guys take those hits down low. He's going to be guarding dudes, like playing the free safety position, not big time center.
It takes one bad switch and a comment to Steven Adams to get your shit rocked, is what I'm saying. And like, those are like really big things. And yeah, obviously I think he is going to be playing wing and stuff, but
yeah,
I think it, like, his adjustment to the game is probably going to look a little more ugly than like some of the more recent talent. And I do believe it. Like, I don't think his transition will be as smooth as like Luka's was or anything like that. Like, he came on and he was hitting the gas pretty hard, but I don't know. I have reservations about him.
Yeah. Well, and I worry more about like not necessarily like one impact type of injuries. I worry more about the progressive stress injuries with someone that height. Because that's a lot of stress on the feet and the lower leg.
I understand all the concerns. I think it's all valid. But I think if you look at the way Adam Silver looked at him on that stage, he's like Michael Jordan, LeBron James, Victor Wembanyama, new face of the franchise. That's Adam Silver's LeBron James. Like, this is his generational dude, because LeBron was already the face of the league by the time Silver took over. So I don't think there's any way that this dude gets hidden season. Whether he should or not is a different conversation, but they want him to take over immediately because he is everything that the NBA has worked for the last like 30 seasons of making this an international game and expanding the interest into other countries. To have potentially the next great superstar in NBA history be from a different country and be French, that's everything that they've wanted for forever.
I think the like the slide or the transition to that has been a little more gradual than, because we've had a lot of really good talent come over from like over the pond, you know what I'm saying? And like, we have like the past couple of MVPs have all been out of the country. So I think, yeah, like it definitely gets more exposure on the game overseas, and it brings in more international money. And I think like Adam Silver's thing is like, holy cats, like we just hit a giant payday. I like, coming from a position of like watching people kind of get in those situations, we have a lot more busts than we do like successes. And I want like him to have like a fair shot to just develop. And I know that that's not something that he'll get because of pro sports expectations and all this other stuff. It'll be definitely interesting though.
Yeah.
I will agree with that.
Yeah.
The expectations are already there for him to be the next great thing.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
I just think if you're Greg Popovich here and you've just been handed this incredibly awesome, shiny new toy that could get you some chips, not saying that the minutes can't build up over the course of the year, but right off the bat, with the frequency that NBA games are played, why would you take that risk right off the bat that you could set everything back by not like measuring things a little, at least in the early part of his rookie season?
They're going to load manage the shit out of him, just like any other superstar in the league right now. But I think if we sit here and we think like, oh, he's going to play 15, 25 minutes a game coming off the bench, like, it's not happening. He's going to start away, and he's going to be on national TV.
No, he's going to start.
Yeah, I mean, it might be 35, 30 to 35 minutes a game, 62 games this season. You see him on like more of that type of schedule, but he'll play. They want to win. My only note under Victor Wembanyama was actually just that I just saw too many Wemby stories this week leading up to the draft, and we're just going to continue to see so many.
It is definitely a bit of oversaturation fatigue.
It's our specialty when someone new and shiny comes into the league, though. That was the pick we all knew was coming. All week, it was debated about whether the Hornets were going to take Scoot Henderson or Brandon Miller at 2. The odds swung wildly with every single tweet from Shams, who coincidentally works for FanDuel, in case anybody didn't know that. So FanDuel employee moving the lines back and forth all week. Brandon Miller gets selected at 2 to palpable boos from the Hornets fans present at the draft. If you've seen the videos from the Hornets draft parties, boos. Lots and lots of boos. Safe to say the fans not happy with the Brandon Miller pick. I was trying to think about what happened because it was just last week that we were talking about how it was a debate between Scoot and Brandon Miller. And you could do all the on the court, off the court stuff. You could look at all the stuff, but that either pick was probably going to be a solid pick. And you just had to go with whatever player you preferred. I can't help but sit here now a week later and think that the Hornets absolutely blew this pick.
Well, it's the Hornets.
That's kind of the thing, is that like this guy has now been selected at number 2. He's like the franchise cornerstone for them, right? Or he's supposed to be. And everyone in Charlotte hates him, and he hasn't even touched the floor yet. And I feel like that is something that only a franchise like the Hornets could pull off.
I mean, the Knicks did it too. Like the Knicks had a really good, talented big man, and you heard nothing but boos when he got drafted, and like he was really good.
Yeah, and to be fair, like if Brandon Miller is really good, and I think he can be, it's not going to matter. But I really think what happened this past week is that Brandon Miller opened his mouth.
Yep.
On a lot of interviews. And the
only one question really mattered, I think.
Yeah. So he was interviewed a lot leading up to the draft and after the draft. Mentioned that Paul George is his GOAT, his personal GOAT. Was pressed on that after the draft and said, LeBron James is the GOAT. Paul George is my GOAT because he's my hero. And it seemed like it was just straight downhill for him after that.
I'm never mind. I'm for it. I'm glad he got drafted number 2.
I think what the problem was with the fans is that Scoot feels like a superstar. Like he feels like he has that it factor off the court.
Yeah. Well,
people fell in love with him.
He doesn't have hardcore legal issues and being tied to a bunch of really unsavory stuff, which for the record, Adam Silver probably was losing whatever hair was left on his body over some of those things when those were taking place at the time in college.
It's just scales under his skin because he's a lizard man.
Well, he's losing scales or molting or something. I don't know. Like, I think that the issues that Brandon Miller brings to me aren't necessarily as even on the court stuff. It's all off court. And I'm going to say you're given a young individual who, my dad, bless his heart, always told me that nothing good ever happens past 11 o'clock. And like, that's like the easiest lesson you can learn. And this guy is like the shining example of everything that you wouldn't want in that aspect. And it's like, do you want to be like the next guy who has his shit together, or do you want to be the next Ja Morant?
It's funny because anytime something happened in the draft that Adam Silver wasn't happy about, be like, Brandon Miller selected number 2. We're going to talk about what happened in Alabama. And Adam Silver's on. He's like, Victor Wembanyama is 7'5". Look at him. And he's French. It's beautiful. It's going to be all season. We went into Brandon Miller's off-court stuff in a lot of detail last week. But it's just like, I don't know, man. You line him up next to Scoot, and all of the personality stuff is just, it's on full display. There's like a spotlight put on it because like Scoot acts and feels like a superstar. Like just looking at him at the draft, he just looked like a star. Like he looks like a star in the making. And Brandon Miller, it's like, God, do I have to worry about, even when we get away from the legal stuff, it's just like, does he have the it factor? Does he have that dog in him? And it's questionable.
Obviously, it remains to be seen what happens with roster moves going forward. But, Scoot currently is on the same roster as a guy who I think like his mentality with playing the game and just like from everything I've read about him generally just trying to be like the best guy to his teammates and all that shit. Very similar to Dane. Everything I've read in terms of like just that mentality and that like, oh, y'all think that guy's better than me? Okay. Well, let me show you you're wrong. It's like taking all that stuff personally in the best way possible.
Yeah, I still think that like on court, what Brandon Miller brings is harder to find than what Scoot Henderson brings as a prospect. But it's like I can't shake that just gut feeling that Scoot is going to be a stud and that I'm not sure about Brandon Miller right now.
But I think if we sit here and we ask each other, like, what is the difference between these guys' two ceilings? I don't want to say it's completely negligible, but it's not something where I'm like, well, yeah, I need that ceiling significantly more than I need the other. I think in terms of like what I think is a realistic floor between the two, I think Scoots is like notably higher because I just have a hard time believing that he's not going to like truly grind into being at least a mainstay starter in the NBA.
Yeah, it's not so much that like Scoot can't be as good at his ceiling as Brandon Miller can be at his. It's just like if they both hit their ceiling, I think it's easier to find 75% of Scoot Henderson than it is to find 75% of a 6'9" forward who can score from all three levels and has incredible feel for the game as like a 19, 20-year-old.
Yes, but I think the point is that if you get, all of what Scoot can be, you don't necessarily need that player. You need other guys to play that position on the floor that can fill some of those roles, but they don't necessarily need to be that like high level 3-level scorer. You need the 3-and-D guy. You need the guy who can be a slasher, but they don't necessarily need to be all the same player.
The pushback I would offer on Miller is like he might have the 3-tier game or like inside mid and like downtown range kind of thing, but like we haven't seen him finish inside at the NBA level. And that there's like a big difference with those kinds of things, like and with the mid-range like game dying in the NBA as each season progresses, I think that puts him at a little bit of a disadvantage too. I mean, you see some players, Jimmy Butler is a really good example of that. He's got like an awesome mid-range game, but like that's not what teams are being built around. I would say that's more of like a late 80s, early 90s kind of stuff where, you did a lot of, creating your own shot, taking a step inside, getting a pump fake, getting a good shot off, that kind of stuff. But like when it comes down to it, if he can't establish himself on the outside and keep that consistent, and he can't establish the ability to finish inside, I think he's going to have a really hard time. And, goes back to some of the things we were saying about like Victor is, like this guy's pretty lean. He's really small. Like, I mean, he's tall, but that like height only gets you so far. You gotta be able to be on balance, banging inside, and being athletic and making really good or really hard crashes at the rim. You got to be going up against guys who are going to be 270 to 300 pounds. Like, I think that's like a tall order for somebody just coming into the league on a team that is just dog shit, if we're going to be honest. Like, who's going to support him? Who's going to help foster his growth? Like, this is a situation of just like flat out failure. And I really believe that, like, I don't think it's fair to compare ceilings or floors because, Brandon Miller is going to be getting a lot of money. He is at a significant disadvantage going to Charlotte. Significant. Where Scoot Henderson going to play with one of the greatest fucking talents that we've seen in a very long time, if he stays there, right?
Yeah.
Like that's a very big possibility that he could get moved. But even still,
more importantly, one of the best leaders.
Yeah. And I don't know if Portland is as hostile a place to play as Charlotte, but I mean, I don't even know if they're putting asses in seats in Charlotte, to be honest with you.
Charlotte is a franchise that seems like it's stuck on the wheel of mediocrity, and that I'm not sure that it's getting off anytime soon, pretty much no matter what they do. And that's why something like this hurts more. And like, maybe you're totally right, Clint. Like, maybe if the roles are reversed and Brandon Miller goes to Portland, that he ends up being a better player because there's guys there that are going to foster and develop him.
Yep.
But I don't know that like Portland is really that great of a franchise either, though. I mean, I know you get to play maybe with Dame, but like, I don't think the history of the Trailblazers is that of like a Warriors or a Heat where I'm like, oh, this is the team that's really going to develop somebody. Is it better than Charlotte? Yeah, but you also can't really
honestly
be worse.
Significantly better than Charlotte, though. Like, if you really look at the history of the Portland Trailblazers, they've had numerous teams like spread out over the years that have been very good teams that have made a lot of runs. That is actually part of why, like, there's been frustration in Portland, is that this franchise hasn't been able to like get back over that hump and be a real threat again. But when I look at Brandon Miller, the thing that kind of like starts to jump out to me is, okay, now he's in the league. There's not really anyone on that roster that he's gonna have like a clear mentor with, right? So when he's in the league, who's he gonna look to first for like guidance in the NBA? Well, you already told us. It's Paul George. If we are going to put anything into that, and I guess there's a debate as to whether or not you should put anything into that. But if we're going to take anything away from that, I don't think that's a great sign for his development.
So I feel like I'm being very contrarian and extremely combative today. And maybe it's because I was sleeping the 15 minutes leading up to this podcast, but the only thing I would push back on the Paul George piece of it is that when Paul George came into the NBA, he was extremely raw, and he's developed into like a perennial all-star at one point. So,
but we're not talking about that Paul George anymore. We're talking about
playoff P.
We're talking about a man who has been very comfortable with coming up short in a lot of situations. Quite frankly, has not pushed his game to another level as he's plateaued.
Well, he can't hear the coaching over all that money he's made.
Yeah, I know. I agree with you on that point where, like, I feel like, we've talked about this almost every year, that I just feel like Paul George is like the number one player who should be better than he is.
Yep.
I mean, but you do have to give him some credit for getting there, though.
Oh, for sure. I mean, there was a point in time where I was like, man, like, if he keeps developing the way he is, like, he's a top 5 player easily. But he got comfortable and he stopped developing the way that he was. And I don't know what message he's going to be sending to a young Brandon Miller.
I am not like a fan of like Paul George. I would never say that like I am super appreciative of like his game. I think he puts his foot in his mouth a lot. I think we're not considering the fact that this man had a fucking tibia and fibia compound fracture and like essentially amputated his leg and like put it back together and is still able to play at the level that he's playing at. I think that like needs to be stated. I don't know. We can play a lot of what ifs about how injuries like can impact the trajectory of a player's like career. But I think it's phenomenal that he even got to where he was because I'm sure that at one point in time he was like, I'm not playing ball anymore. So I think it's important to put that out there. Like I'll shit on him all day, but I think that he does deserve credit where like I don't think anybody expected him to come back and be as good as he was or is.
No,
rather.
I'll agree with that. My critiques of his game are not necessarily tied to scoring or his physical capabilities. I think he's a relatively selfish player.
Yeah. So Scoot goes to Portland at 3, and Portland now just refusing to not take both paths at the same time. This was my complaint about them last year, is that
we've been complaining about this for a while.
It's not entirely their fault now because they're kind of stuck.
Yeah.
So you have like the young core of Scoot and Sharp and like let's throw Simons in there, even though he's a little bit older than the other guys. And then you have
an immediate boost.
Yep. But then you also are like trying to win a championship around Dame. So they're like rebuilding, also trying to win a championship, not really 100% sure what the direction is. But also to be fair to them, like we talked about, there's not a good trade out there for Dame right now. Like any deal that you take for Dame this offseason is going to be selling for 65 cents on the dollar. You know, it's if he demands to go to the Heat, it's like Hero, Jovic, and Jarquez, the guy they just drafted, and like some future picks for Dame, which not great return, but like there's not a ton out there for him right now. There's not really a trade that makes sense. On the other hand, there's not really like a superstar for sale that makes sense to go all in on with like Scoot and Sharp or Sharp and Simons or whoever the trade ends up being. So they're kind of stuck going into the season with this roster, especially because like Dame just seems like he's never going to demand a trade. He would maybe strongly suggest it, but I don't think he's ever going to be that guy that's like, trade me or I'm not playing. But unless he does that, Portland's front office is basically not going to trade him because they don't want to be assholes.
You can't be the general manager in Portland that trades Damian Lillard and have Damian Lillard get over there and be like, oh yeah, no, I really wanted to stay there. They traded me against my will. Right. That you immediately will just be like blacklisted from every restaurant in Portland.
I feel like we're setting up for that. And the thing that's been interesting for me in the last like week or so is that I love Dame. You guys love Dame. Everybody loves Dame.
George does not love Dame.
Paul George does not. I'm more out on Dame as a leader right now than I have been, I think, throughout the time he's been in the NBA. I'm sick of this act right now. The stories coming out about like, oh, he really wants to stay in Portland and be on a contender, but also he's going to kind of wait to see what they do in free agency. Like he has them operating right now with like the looming specter of him demanding a trade. where they get 60 cents on the dollar for him, but he's like not giving the franchise like the clear direction of like, I guess this is what I need or like this is what I want kind of thing. I feel like he wants to be traded to Miami, but he doesn't want to
Yeah.
say he wants to be traded to Miami.
Well,
Because this
and
whole like loyalty thing is like basically who he is and doesn't want to ruin his reputation.
I mean, here's my thing though. Like, he doesn't have a no trade clause, and if that is what the GM thinks is the best path for that franchise, then they should just have a conversation with Dame and say like, "Hey, this is what we think we should do." At least like tell him we want to trade you and we want to make sure that you're happy where you go, but we're going to trade you. Because yes, you can say like he's kind of holding them hostage, but there's technically nothing stopping them from trading him.
I mean, technically, contract wise, yes. They can't, like you just said, you can't be the GM that trades him unless he asks for a trade. That's just how the NBA is.
I mean, there is definitely semantics that stop you. Yes. But like you can make a trade. And I think that it goes over fine if you have that conversation with him and you get him on board with where he goes.
Yeah, I feel like really like what I'm trying to get at here is more that they're going into free agency with extremely little money. They have like $4 million to spend. And he's putting them in a position where he's like, if you don't bring in dudes who can help us contend next year, then I want out. But he's doing all that. It's all the same superstar stuff that like the LeBrons and stuff of the world do without coming out and saying it to the media, which like, does it make it better? Yes. They're keeping it all in house and he's working with them. I'll give him credit for that.
Yeah.
But it's
I think it's more mature.
It is. It's it's definitely a more mature way to handle it. It's a good word for it. But he's like, you guys need to go out and get all the guys I want in free agency. But that's not guaranteeing he's going to stay. Like his dream apparently is that they bring in Jeremy Grant and Draymond Green to play with him. And like I don't really know where that team goes. Like
flounders.
Yeah. And at best, first round exit. That is the best case scenario.
I tweeted it today and I quoted Matt by saying, this is why you don't let players be GMs. But like, so what if they go out and they spend a ton of money re-signing Jeremy Grant and then he goes, yeah, that's not really good enough. I want to go to Miami now. You know, he is holding this franchise hostage, even if he's doing it in a more mature way. He's kind of forcing their hand. And I know this because this is the Tom Brady game plan from when he left the Patriots, where he's like, I could leave. I'm going to see what you guys do first. And then they don't do what he wants them to do. And he's like, yeah, okay, I'm going to leave now. And I feel like that's where they're at. And if I was Portland, I would really be sitting and having a conversation with him and just being like, listen, if you want to be traded, let us know now and we'll do it. You know, if you're going to stay, let us know now because we're not going to trade you after we go and do all this free agency stuff, even if you ask for it. Like I would try to push him to make that decision before free agency opens this weekend.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think that you should be letting players decide your roster creation plan. Certainly allowing players to like certain players voice their interest in certain guys or like, hey, this is what I feel like could really help me as something to consider. But like looking to your star player all the time to tell you like who to bring in every year, that's toxic. And yeah, like it's not great for Dame or any other player to do that. But like to a certain degree, you allow it to happen at a certain point. Like
that's kind of
they can decide to leave, but at least you like if you do all that stuff and lose with them there after doing it, they're like, okay, well, like, wouldn't you have rather just like gone down with what you actually thought was the right way to go?
yeah. This is just where we've ended up with the player empowerment stuff, though, is that if you have a star on your team and you don't let them be part of the decision making process, you're basically have already made the decision for them to leave.
Yeah.
Or to be traded. And even if you do, this is kind of the shitty part about player empowerment is that even if you give him everything he wants, if it's not successful, he could just come back next season and be like, yeah, I want to be traded. And then you're stuck with Jeremy Grant and Draymond Green for 3 more seasons.
Right.
So,
and man, like the situation in Portland really escalated from Terry Stotts throwing out second half game plans to blow 4 15-point leads in 4 games in a row. Everyone forgets about that. Like, how the fuck do you do that?
Carefully.
Yeah. So I don't even know how this team could possibly acquire Draymond unless it's a sign and trade with the Warriors. Looking at the cap situation. And it's like, at that point, are you really willing to give Anthony Simons to the Warriors to facilitate getting Draymond on your team?
Why would you give up the better player?
Why would you get someone who, like, you don't need an emotional leader on Portland? You already have that. And like, why would you go after someone who is as volatile? And I mean, I think Draymond's a really good player. I think like he works really hard. I also think he's a fucking idiot and he can't keep his mouth shut and he can't stop from kicking people in the groin and all this other stuff when it matters. Like, I don't want someone I believe is a liability in the finals because they can't stop getting fucking technical fouls.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big, big gamble on somebody who on the stat sheet impacts the game. I don't want to say marginally, but for what you're asking for, that's not the player that like you're getting. You're not getting a guy who's going to impact the sheet in like a really meaningful way. That's just how I feel about like Draymond. I think that he's good on the Warriors, but that doesn't mean that he'll be good in Portland.
Yeah, I think that anywhere but Golden State right now, Draymond Green is a net negative. I don't disagree that he is a talented player, but man, all the other stuff that he brings with him and like his deficiency as a scorer and shooter at this point, like, yeah, no, I'm good anywhere but Golden State where you have Steph Curry and Klay Thompson.
I'll put it like this: he's no Rasheed Wallace.
No,
Rasheed Wallace can get away with all that fucking nonsense.
Yeah,
and like be better for it, but I don't believe Draymond can.
Rasheed Wallace ain't swinging at his teammates.
Yeah, that was another point I was gonna make.
Yeah, Draymond is.
And let's be real, but with the Jordan Poole trade, we know that Draymond's going back to Golden State.
Mm-hmm. I was just about to say that too. There was a report today, though, saying that there were a couple teams who were going to be bidding on Draymond this offseason, and the Pistons and the Kings were listed amongst the teams. And I just want to tell everyone that when we come back next week and it's a bidding war between the Sacramento Kings and the Detroit Pistons for Draymond Green services, that will be the best episode in the history of this podcast, with Matt and I trying to push him to the other one's team for a full straight 90 minutes. I think that Draymond...
I don't want to mediate that either. Like, I would be so annoyed. I'd be like, I don't want him in either of these places. Get him over to Boston.
Boston, ironically, could actually use Draymond Green because all the things that he brings to the Warriors are like all of the things that Boston's missing, like some balls
and
some
rebounding and
aggressiveness.
defense.
Yeah.
And somebody who's willing to bark at people and not take a back seat to everybody else.
Oh,
it's like a bunch of Canadians playing basketball. It's like they're all too nice to each other. What the hell?
He has like that alpha mentality that they're missing.
It's all fun and games until Jason Tatum is giving up the last shot to Draymond Green for 3.
The last two teams I wanted to talk about before we get going are the homer teams here.
Yeah.
So like I said, the draft went pretty chalk up front, and that resulted in the Pistons taking Asar Thompson, one of the Thompson twins. Matt, how do you feel about the Pistons haul from the draft?
I mean, overall, I feel pretty good. I mean, I obviously was pretty clear about being a Jarris Walker man. I think Asar can be very good on this team. My biggest question with him is how long does it take him to be the guy that they're hoping he is? Because he is coming from OTE and not really having a ton of other talent on the floor with the tape that we have. So obviously the NBA has been watching these guys since they were like 14, so they know a hell of a lot more about him than we do. He seems to fit the culture, and it adds to that kind of like weird like rivalry thing with the Rockets, because apparently Rockets fans want to pick fights because they want to pretend that Jalen is better than Cade, but whatever.
Yeah, well, like Jalen like hates Cade because Cade got selected in front of him, so
because he's better than him.
Here's a question.
Yeah, go for it.
What do the Pistons need? What are they not good at?
I mean, their biggest deficiency is wing defense. And I
offensively, what do they need?
Cade Cunningham to stay healthy.
They need shooting.
Yeah.
Like they're two good players.
Yep.
Are not strong shooters.
Nope.
I'd say like they're playmakers, but they're not strong shooters.
Yeah.
And like you can develop shooters, it just takes time.
Yep.
Whereas I think like Asur coming in probably has a little bit further along or a little bit better opportunity to prove that he's going to be more of a shooter, more able to slot into that slot quicker than, you know, somebody else like his brother, for example, right? Like, so I think that in that regard, it's a good pick. However, it's not a sexy pick. And it's one of those things where like, if he doesn't pan out and if he's not great right away, we just continue to flounder in like 8, 9, 10 territory. And I don't think that's where the Pistons need or want to be.
Well, and I actually think that the Marcus Sasser pick is actually a more plug and play pick. I mean, if the guy was 6'5", he's easily a top 10 pick. The guy is a straight up bucket getter and he can shoot. But you know, he's closer to 6 foot. And but like you watch that guy play, he's got dog in him.
Yeah, I like Sasser a lot. My only thing I wanted to say about the Thompson twins that I didn't say last week is that really like in the last week, I felt like the Thompson twins were two of the biggest winners of the draft from a just like a personal perspective of I really like these guys now.
They seem like good kids.
They came across like, I like the family. They came across very genuine, very like I didn't not like them going into it, but I was like kind of iffy on the whole OTE thing because I was like, I don't really love the OTE league and the whole TikTok thing. I was like, I don't know. And now I find myself really rooting for these guys to develop just because I just liked them. Like, I I came out of the draft not liking Brandon Miller on a personal level,
Yeah.
and really liking the Thompson twins. So that was one of the big changes for me last week. I think a solid pick for the Pistons, and we'll see how he develops. There's obviously a lot of questions there coming out of OTE, but I like the personality, the attitude, I like the culture fit. I like what Troy Weaver said about him. I believe the quote was that talent is talent, no matter where it is. Halle Berry is beautiful in church or at the grocery store. And you can recognize that. And I've met Halle Berry personally, and I can confirm that Troy Weaver is correct. Very pretty, no matter where she is.
But where did you meet her?
I can't say.
Was it at the grocery store?
It was, let's say it was not in a place where she would have been like dolled up.
All right.
It was where I used to work. And if you guys have listened to this pod long enough, you know where it was.
He broke his NDA.
We're just not going to name names.
We've done it. We got it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think people know that, like, in my old line of work, that I met quite a few celebrities and athletes. I have some good stories that we can share when we're not recording, unfortunately. So, the other team I want to talk about real quick, my team, Sacramento Kings, picking 24th in the draft, completely trade out of the pick in order to dump Richaun Holmes' contract on the Dallas Mavericks. The Mavericks take it into the player exception they created earlier in the night by trading back from 10 to 12. The Kings have now created $36 million in functional cap space leading into free agency. This just reeks of they already have a deal in place with somebody, and they just had to free up the space to do it, whether it's one somebody or two somebodies. Not that we would ever tamper, because we know tampering is illegal and that nobody in the NBA would ever tamper with anybody. I think Monty McNair, with how much he loves draft picks and how good he's been drafting for Sacramento, you don't do this unless you already know who you're bringing in.
What caliber player is that?
Why, I think I know who it is. My prediction is that it's Kyle Kuzma. I'm not saying that I'm super excited about it. I'm just saying this is who it is. There's previous interest there. They tried to trade for him already when he left LA. They had the deal in place to acquire him before the Lakers pulled the trigger on Russell Westbrook. We know Monty likes him. He's a younger upgrade over the Harrison Barnes spot. Like, he's a better player than Barnes. He's younger. He fits the timeline. That's my guess at who it is. They've also been linked to Cam Johnson, Draymond Green, and Chris Middleton.
All of those are just kind of meh energy to me. I don't know if you agree. I don't have a dog in the Sacramento race, but I don't get excited or believe that those guys are gonna be the component to a championship team. I mean, I could be wrong, but that's just kind of my 2 cents on it.
Yeah, the only thing I would say is that I don't think there's anybody in free agency. Those are like the best free agents.
Who wants to go to Sacramento? Like, what the fuck is there? Like, that would be my next question. Like, at least, let's take Detroit. Detroit is not a glamorous city at all, but it has a lot of history, and it has a lot of, like, blue-collar workers who guys can get behind and say, yeah, like, I want to go work for these guys because they're, like, America's backbone, busting their asses, trying to get stuff done. And, like, I have that mentality where it's like, Sacramento, like, what do we got out there? I'm genuinely asking because I have no idea.
We have a giant fucking laser that we shoot into the sky. Where else has a giant laser that they shoot into the sky every time they win?
That's interesting.
There's not a ton. And this has always been the problem with Sacramento, is that they cannot get free agents unless they pay huge premiums. And this is kind of why I think it's Kyle Kuzma, is that they freed up like $36 million. $30+ million is a very specific amount of money to go into free agency with. I would not be shocked if it's a $30 million deal for Kyle Kuzma.
How long?
I would say it's probably like somewhere in the range of like, what would it be, 4 years, 120, something like that. Uh, wouldn't surprise me at all because you got to take whatever you think a player's worth and you got to add the free agency premium. And then you got to take whatever number that is and add we got to get him to sign in Sacramento premium. So, like, if you think Kuzma's like a 4 for 80 or like a 4 for 100 type player, to get him to Sacramento in free agency, yeah, it's going to be 4 for 120, even though they just had the best season in franchise history, or at least since like the early 2000s. It's just the nature of the beast, and I'm not going to be shocked when it happens. They were linked to Middleton. I think Middleton's going to be too expensive. I think he's 35 plus going back to Milwaukee. Draymond, I think, is going back to Golden State at this point.
I mean, there you got rid of Poole, so there's no reason for him not to go back.
Cam Johnson is someone I'd be potentially interested in. I think he's going to be another guy who's pretty expensive, though, with the teams that are interested in his services as well. And then you got to outbid the Nets, who are very likely going to match whatever offer he gets as a restricted free agent. So I think they have a deal in place. I think it's Kuzma. It might be one more person that they're bringing in, maybe like a backup center, nothing insane. But I think they take that money. I think it's Kuzma, and I think it's re-signing like Trey Lyles and some of the other guys that they have leaving this offseason. And that's the team we're bringing back. And I don't hate that. I'd be excited to have the upgrade in the Harrison Barnes spot. Is that a championship team? No, but I don't know what this franchise does to create a championship team. Like, they just don't have the Jokic, Giannis, Curry level player as good as Fox and Sabonis were.
So, of those players that we mentioned as potential options, what would be your preference?
I kind of like Brook Lopez. I didn't even say his name, but I still, there's a soft spot in my heart for Brook Lopez. I think what we need to do is upgrade the Harrison Barnes spot. Like, I think it makes sense. Middleton, I think, is the best player that was mentioned there. So I guess it would be Middleton, but like, do I want Middleton for 40 or Kuzma for 30? I'm probably okay doing Kuzma for 30 at that point, or 25 if we can get him there.
Yeah, well, and I mean, anytime Middleton comes up, you got to talk about like which Middleton are you getting on any given night? Which, like, hey, over the course of an 82 game season, maybe not the biggest deal, right? Because that eventually evens out. But you don't have enough games in a series in the playoffs for it to even out. If he starts off the Chris Middleton who's shooting 15% for the first 3 games.
Yeah. Oh, I want to retract my previous statement. I want to say Cam Johnson is actually my preference if I could have one of the guys that we named.
Go fuck yourself.
The Pistons are in on Cam Johnson too, but I think that's the right pick. So go for it, Clint. Give me some hope.
Okay, so ways that I believe the Sacramento Kings upgrading that spot or getting somebody else in there. Hear me out. Where are they rated as far as like team defense overall in the league?
Almost last.
I don't know about all that. In the 22-23 season, it looks like they're sitting around 9th in defensive, just whatever. And I think if you get some injuries and some of the other teams in the West, you have a little bit better chance. And if you get your shit together and really buckle down and focus on what you're decent or good at, I think there is a very legitimate chance that like you could see another like ragtag group of guys string together some games that are really good and then make a run towards like the finals. And the reason I say that is because like we got to witness that in 2003, 2004, and 2004, 2005 in Michigan. There was not a single goddamn superstar on that Detroit Pistons team. And what they did was play defense really well. And they played really well as a team. I don't think that means that like you have to have an absolute downright star to win a championship. I think that you have to have a really good coach and you have to have your priorities in line. And if you got a bunch of guys who want to bust their ass, which I mean, you might disagree with me here, but just looking at the numbers, like that's what it says that they want to do. I don't know. I feel like there's a path there depending on how things shake out. And is it likely? Probably not. But I think that there is a lot to be said about about a bunch of guys getting together and really buying into like that system.
Yeah, I'm excited for next season, especially after the reps they got this season. I think they could be better in the playoffs. I mean, they took the Warriors to 7 and easily could have had that series at multiple points. I think you could also make the case that Sabonis was hurt the second half of the season and in the playoffs, but
which is a pretty big miss, right? Like you're like he's going to be a guy that you can depend on in some capacity.
In the modern NBA, for the vast majority of it, you have to have a top 5 player to win the championship. If we look at just like finals MVPs as an example, it's Jokic, Curry, Giannis, LeBron, Kawhi, Durant, LeBron. Iguodala got one, but they had Curry on that team. Kawhi, LeBron, Dirk, Kobe. Like it's very rare that a team really throughout like the history of the NBA wins an NBA title without having one of the very best dudes in the league, because one guy can make such a huge impact on a basketball game because it's only really 5-on-5.
Yeah.
Could we maybe pull off something magical? Sure. Is Kyle Kuzma the key to that? Probably not. But
I would agree with that part. Yeah.
I think if we had a better player in the Harrison Barnes spot, I think we're in the Western Conference Finals last season. Yeah. I think we get stomped by the Nuggets, but I think that we're there.
Yeah. And I would say the difference with that like elite superstar is that what they actually give you is more margin for error. Right.
Yeah.
So
I would agree with that.
I think what this Kings team needs is to understand that, like, well, that's how you're going to play. You got to play error free. And that's a tall ask of human beings. But if you can spend the season like priding yourself on playing extremely clean basketball to the best of your ability and take that into the postseason, well, then those habits are already formed. And you're more focused than ever during the playoffs. So,
well, it depends on who you are.
Right.
Your name's James Harden. You're not.
Yeah. There's so many distractions in the strip club. But there's a chance. I'm not saying that I expect it, but that team showed me a lot in these playoffs that I didn't really fully expect to be there. And so I'm not going to rate them off next year. Yeah. There was just way more than I expected to see out of a Domantas Sabonis and De'Aaron Fox One team. And I think that both of those guys really showed me a lot about who they are as players and leaders this year.
Yeah, the very last point on the Kings before we sign off. You have to make a splash now. This is your last chance, because after next season, you have to give Sabonis the max extension, and you've already given Fox the max rookie. So if you want to add another piece for a lot of money, you have to do it right now, which is, I think, another reason that they're looking to make this splash. So my dream scenario is that we get Kuzma for less than I think we're going to, and that we're able to add another piece and bring back like Trey Lyles and bring Sasha Vesnikov over from Europe, which sounds like it's happening. And add some pieces that way, and then go into next season with some real expectations to be a conference finals team, which is insane to say after the last 20 years of basketball I've had to endure. But as always, Fouled Out can be found on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Cast, Overcast, anywhere you get your podcast. You can hit us up on Twitter at Fouled Out Sports. You can find Matt on Twitter at Matador_defense. You can find our videos on TikTok next to the OTE videos at Fouled Out Sports Podcast. It's a long name, but you can't miss it. Clint, thank you for being here with us. I'm glad that we got you back after a couple weeks of missing you.
I really, really wanted to be here for the finals. I am sad that I missed it. So it was very good to be back. I enjoyed myself. Thank you.
You are welcome. What you can be here for is NBA Top 30, which is, I think, where Matt and I are going with the podcast during the offseason of NBA and football. Is to a couple of years ago, we did a very controversial, very heavily listened to set of podcasts where we rank the top 30 players in the NBA. I think we will do that exercise again starting in a couple weeks here. So
yeah,
next week, back with free agency updates, talk a little bit more about some of these teams and some of the moves, because free agency opens this weekend on the 1st. And then probably after that, we start with like 30 through 21 and start going down from there in I'm sure what will be a very knockdown, drag out set of podcasts again, because there was heated debate last time. It'll be back in a couple weeks, so you guys can look forward to that. The NBA Top 10. We will see you next week for free agency updates. Matt, Clint, thank you guys for being here. I'll talk to you soon.
Yep.
Have a good one.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye,
Bye, Mom.